Not bad, not good. One of those evenings where you borrow a version of yourself that fits the room and return it later, intact enough to reuse. I wore the navy dress that doesn't ask questions. I smiled the way I've learned to smile, present, unassuming, useful. Inside, the restaurant hummed with money trying not to look like money. Glassware clinked softly. Everyone seemed to know where to stand. My husband's boss was turning 50. That mattered. People angled their bodies accordingly. I stood slightly behind my husband as we were folded into a small circle near the bar. Names passed, titles followed. I noticed how often introductions came with context, like disclaimers. This is Mark, VP of Operations. This is Elena, she runs the European team. When it was my turn, my husband kept his hand on my back, a familiar pressure. He grinned, relaxed, as if performing for an audience he trusted. "And this," he said, lightly, "is my wife. She's just a housewife." He laughed, not cruelly, not even defensively, like it was a shortcut, a way to keep the evening moving. There was a pause, not dramatic, just perceptible. Someone smiled politely, someone else nodded and turned their attention elsewhere. The circle subtly adjusted its shape, and I was no longer necessary to it. I didn't correct him. I felt something then, not sharp, not explosive, more like the quiet acknowledgement of a bruise you know will bloom later. I took a sip of wine. The taste was thin. I could have said a dozen things. I could have explained that staying home had been a choice shaped by timing, by caregiving, by an agreement that slowly hardened into assumption. I could have mentioned the consulting work I still did quietly, the credentials that hadn't expired just because I'd stepped out of view. But the room had already moved on, and I let it. For a while, I floated. Conversations brushed past me but didn't settle. People asked my husband about expansion plans, about headcount. Another asked if I enjoyed cooking. I answered calmly. I watched. Years ago, I learned how to be underestimated without shrinking. It's a skill, though no one applauds it. My husband loosened as the evening went on. He didn't look at me much. He didn't need to. Then the room shifted. It was subtle, an intake of attention, like a tide pulling back. Someone straightened, someone else checked their posture. I followed the line of sight and saw him enter, the boss, late, unhurried, wearing authority like it had been tailored. He moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who didn't need to rush. People made space without realizing they were doing it. When he reached our side of the room, his eyes landed on my husband first, a firm handshake, a comment about the quarter. Then his gaze slid to me. He paused. Not long, just long enough. "Wait," he said. He said my name carefully, like he wanted to be sure. "You worked with Latham and Pierce, didn't you? Strategy." A few heads turned. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded like my own. "A while back." He smiled, genuine, pleased. "You were the one who flagged the regional risk before anyone else saw it, saved us a fortune." The word "us" landed softly but decisively. "I still quote that model," he added, then laughed. "Half my team hates you for it." The room changed temperature. Someone near us said my name out loud, testing it. Another asked what I was working on now. My husband didn't speak. His hand dropped from my back. "I'm consulting selectively," I said, "mostly remote." "Smart," the boss said. "Talent doesn't disappear just because it isn't loud." He turned slightly, addressing the small cluster that had formed without anyone meaning to. "She's being modest," he said, "one of the sharpest minds I've worked with." There was no flourish, no raised voice, no correction of my husband's words, just a recalibration. And it held. People leaned in, questions sharpened. Someone asked about frameworks. Someone else asked if I ever missed full-time work. The conversation adjusted to include me, not as an accessory, but as a point of reference. I answered when it made sense, I let silence do some of the work. I didn't perform gratitude. Across from me, my husband stood very still. Not embarrassed exactly, more like someone watching a map redraw itself in real time. Later, when the cake was cut and the speeches blurred together, I felt a strange steadiness settle in my chest. Not triumph, not relief, recognition, maybe. External, finally matching internal. On the way out, my husband reached for the valet ticket before I could. A small thing, an old reflex. He glanced at me, searching for something. Approval, perhaps, or forgiveness. The drive home was quiet, but not hostile. Street lights slid across the windshield. At a red light, he opened his mouth, then closed it again. "I didn't mean," he started, then stopped. The sentence didn't know where to go. "I know," I said, and I did. That was the problem. At home, I hung up my coat carefully. The night hadn't changed everything. We would still have conversations. Some of them would be hard. Some might never happen at all. But something had shifted, and it wasn't going back. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't corrected him in front of his peers. I hadn't needed to.